Brian is a fellow enterprise advisor and also shares the passion to really make a difference in education.
As you come through school, it all hinges on an exam result at the end of the day. In the workplace, it's more about that constant evolution.
In this episode, you'll hear how Brian really invests in TGW's people and also the local community to create an amazing talent pipeline for not only the company, but the overall sector of logistics and manufacturing.
My satisfaction comes from seeing the people thrive. We can give them that meaningful experience where they think, well, I want to be a mechanical engineer. And they come and try it, but then they try a bit of electrical and a bit of something else. And off the back of it, they go, I don't want to do that, or I do want to do it. At least they've had some exposure to it to make an informed choice. Open your eyes and see what's going on and understand that one person's need is very different to another.
Welcome, Brian, and thank you for coming to Inspire to Thrive. As a fellow enterprise advisor, kind of where we connected, and from kind of getting to know you a bit more before doing this interview, I think we've got a kind of shared passion to make a difference around education, and that's kind of the angle which we want to kind of take this interview and kind of sort of like hear from you about what some of your passions are, what your drives are to kind of really make a difference. To get started, why do you do what you do?
Good question. So I guess it's changed over time. As my career's changed and I've done different things. If I think back, when I first sort of went into engineering, I think one of the reasons for that was the influence of my childhood and, my being with my dad, helping him do things around the house or fix the car, those sort of practical elements that I was involved in and exposed to. I think that kind of drove me down that route. I never particularly enjoyed sitting in the classroom at school. I was always happier when I was doing something more hands-on. So I think that's what sort of led me down the engineering route. And then over time, my sort of thirst for knowledge or learning new things sort of went from my own personal interest to that for other people as well. And I think that's what sort of led me down the route now of being more involved in learning and development, with youngsters outside of the workplace, but also in work as well.
It's brilliant. It's interesting, isn't it, how important that vocational learning is and learning then from people like your dad. How do you kind of keep that momentum going within then your learning development with employees?
So I've always believed really that for somebody to be successful in what they're doing, they need to have the right tools to do the job. So if you think about it, the best tool anybody can have is knowledge. So I've always focused on if there's a new task that somebody's doing or a new product that they're going to be using, how do we get the best out of that? How do we help them to be successful? And then encourage sort of my teams and others to continually learn. When you finish school, that's the beginning of the journey rather than the end. So that continual learning throughout your career, either in or out of work, is something that I really believe in.
So how do you feel that you're supported to really make that happen within the company?
I think TGW is quite unique, and one of the founders, he had a philosophy of investing in people, empowering people to be a better version of themselves, and there's a little saying within the business which is focus on people learning and growing. So I think off the back of that, then the business tries to live that, and they try to give people the opportunity to grow either within the business or outside the business as well. We do quite a lot of outreach within the school communities as well, local to where we're based.
Brilliant. So what's influenced you along your career journey?
There's been a few things. I would say, again, working with my dad when I was younger, doing those hands-on things, that's been a big influence in me, sort of following that hands-on passion and belief. I actually wanted to be a car mechanic when I was a kid, but that changed, interestingly changed. I was working in a local garage on work experience. There was an opportunity of a job at the end of it, but it transpired that there was no training, no formal training. It was, you would learn to be a car mechanic, but there was no qualification. So I went and looked at apprenticeships. There was a local company that were recruiting. I went down that route of an apprenticeship instead, because I kind of felt that I needed some qualifications as well as the experience to back it up. So that sort of shaped massively where I headed and what I did within my career.
How's that landscape with apprenticeships changed since then?
When I was, sort of 16, 17, there weren't many around at all, to be honest. And people think there's not many around now, but actually there's a lot more than you think. There's something like 1,500 apprenticeships, different flavours of apprenticeship that are available nowadays. And with the levy and the government funding and things, there's a lot more businesses that are going down that route. Unfortunately, some of it's being manipulated a little bit to these higher level apprenticeships, degree level apprenticeships, whereas it was more sort of aimed at the younger level 2, level 3 vocational type qualifications.
It's interesting, isn't it, how there is now that kind of sort of spectrum from then, level 2, 3 right up to, level 7, 8 with then a degree level apprenticeship. How are you kind of sort of like fitting in with that and, kind of sort of like what you're doing around apprenticeships?
So at TGW, we have various different levels of apprenticeship. So we take quite a few into level 3 from school leavers, from GCSE or A level, and they potentially have opportunities beyond that to go on to a level 4 or do a HNC and independent learning. But we also have some mature learners within the business as well that are studying at those higher level apprenticeships.
Why are TGW investing in apprenticeships?
I think there's a few reasons. I think there's obviously the belief within the business of allowing people to develop and learn. Undoubtedly, the government funding helps. This 95% funding for the schemes, but also that opportunity that it brings people to bring somebody in potentially with very little skills and knowledge, and over that period of their apprenticeship, by the time they come out the other end, they're very well trained, very well educated. They've also got years of experience behind them and not just a qualification. It kind of breeds a little bit of loyalty as well. You've invested in them, and that means that they're more likely to sort of stay with you as a business and continue to develop their career.
So it is almost like you're reliving in that time with your dad, of kind of the loyalty that you had with him and your nurturing talent. Do you get that family feel from an apprenticeship?
Yeah, I think you do. I think the way we've set things up. There's lots of touch points. There's lots of involvement. We have specific people that might be the mentor for the apprentice, or they might be looking after their well-being, as well as the management and those sort of things. So there's quite a big support network. And I'd like to think that if you spoke to the apprentices, they would say, yeah, it does feel like you've almost got your work, well, when you work dad involved as well. So
tell me a bit about then the apprenticeships and work experience programs that you've set up.
When I first joined TGW, would it be 4.5 years ago, something like that, very quickly, almost within a month, we set up the Controls Engineering Apprenticeship Programme, which was sort of linked to my main job at the time. We partnered with the local college. We looked at what best suited those individuals coming in on the apprenticeship for the specific tasks that they'd be doing within the workplace. So we found the right apprenticeship, and we identified the units they'd study and things. Then, of course, we had to start looking at how we got people into the business. We were quite fortunate at that time that we took on 2 apprentices very quickly. We were quite late in the recruitment market, and one of them, they'd started college and the college course was no longer being run, so they'd done the first year, so they sort of transferred onto a different scheme, and the other one was already in work but without training. So he came in and started a formal apprenticeship programme. But off the back of that, what we've realised is it's quite hard to generate the numbers to get people interested. There's still a perception that apprenticeships are knee deep in grease and covered in a pair of overalls and those sort of things. So working hard to try and change that. We do a lot of work with the local schools. We partner with the 2 secondary schools close to our offices, but also work in primary schools. And it's all about building that level of exposure around sort of STEM careers and apprenticeships in general. And off the back of that, we then last summer started our more specific work experience programme. It's really hard now to get work experience off the ground because since COVID, a lot of places aren't in the office. So to what traditionally would have been you'd come in and you'd sit with somebody on their shoulder and you'd work with them, you can't really do that if people are all working remote or working hybrid. So That's a challenge in itself. And then, of course, the other challenge is how do you bring these young people into a workshop environment? And there's complications around insurance and customer sites and all those sort of things. So we decided to sort of flip it on its head, really, and use our training facility. So we developed a week-long program that gives these youngsters the opportunity to try mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and controls engineering. And that gives them a real flavour of all the different elements of those sort of practical hands-on jobs that we have within the business, but in that controlled environment. So it's been really successful, and we've seen people now interested in applying for the apprenticeships off the back of that as well.
And do you think by having that exposure to different departments and different ways of working and different people, how does that help develop then the individual?
You'd like to think for us, it means that they'd want to come in and ultimately come and work for TGW. But for the individual, it gives them the opportunity to actually try things, and it empowers them to make that decision. If you're coming out of school at 16, 17, 18, it's really hard to know what you want to do. It's a big decision. And to think that you're potentially making a choice that lasts for 50 years, or at least that's what the schools will tell you, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life, that's really difficult. So if we can give them that meaningful experience where they think, oh, I want to be a mechanical engineer, and they come and try it, but then they try a bit of electrical and a bit of something else, and off the back of it they go, I don't want to do that, or I do want to do it, at least they've had some exposure to it to make an informed choice.
It's interesting because apparently 7 to 8 encounters, meaningful encounters like that, will increase by about 40% in the employability. And it is so true. But why do you think that kind of is apparent, especially within in your sector?
The vision's not there. People don't really know about what we do. They look at warehousing, they look at logistics, and they think, when a lot of people, when they see our logo or our posters, oh, we're just a logistics firm. You want somebody to move pallets around in a warehouse or to pick, or those sort of things. They don't realise that we're the ones actually putting the automated systems in. So to get that exposure out there for people to understand what we are as a business and what we do, that could be quite difficult. So over time, we've sort of worked further and further back, starting with sort of year 11, year 10 in schools, and now we're working back right the way through into primary schools to give them that meaningful experience and try and help sort of shape their future and make them want to pursue these type of careers.
I suppose that innovation that can kind of come out from that creativity, and then also that investment of their time as they're thinking going through then the education system, can only kind of be a benefit to not just you guys but also the wider sector.
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately, if we're providing these youngsters with these opportunities, it will benefit everybody. Not just us. They might go off and be an engineer somewhere else, or they might go into a similar career, that's maybe not an engineer but still in the tech sector. And I'm quite happy for that. If we need to drive the numbers into the industry, we need to drive it into the sector, whether it's with us specifically or others. The longer term benefit is there for all.
Brilliant. So what other opportunities come out of them building then this talent pipeline through then apprenticeships, work experience?
I think there's various opportunities. If I think about for the business, obviously the opportunity is to create that skilled workforce, to have, find it easier to recruit, to hopefully, you increase your retention because these people tend to be more loyal. For the individuals, obviously, it's the opportunity for them to come in and learn and grow and develop. And if I look at, for me, my involvement in it ultimately, it's kind of shaped my career now. I've come away from the engineering more and now focusing more on the people and the learning development. And I guess that's come directly from that.
Which do you prefer, the engineering or the people?
Today, the people. If you'd have asked me that a few years ago, it would have been the engineering. But I think as you go through your career, things change. Even in your personal life, and I don't know, you become a parent. Your outlook changes completely. So yeah, right now it's the people side.
Do you think TGW's values and vision has helped influence that? Because there's a lot of people who work in your line of work that find people are the headache, people, and often that's kind of sort of like the. So do you feel the values and vision have been important to that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's interesting that the values within the business were relaunched probably about 2 years ago, and I was actually part of the team that was put together locally to try and sort of bring them to life and make people live the values. And what I realised very quickly was that the values that the business had sort of defined were very much aligned with my own beliefs and my own values. So I think it has sort of shaped me and pushed me more a little bit in that direction that I've always been passionate about, I've always wanted to do. So it's kind of, I guess it's empowered me really to crack on and make a change.
How does it make you feel knowing that you're also influencing a company of your size through then that passion and that drive that you have?
Your satisfaction comes from different places depending on what your job is. You know, a few years back when I was a controls engineer, my satisfaction was bringing something to life, seeing it do what it was designed to do. You know, whereas now, you know, my satisfaction comes from seeing the people thrive, seeing the people achieve things, seeing, you know, somebody come in early careers, not straight from school, not really knowing anything, at the other end in 4 years' time as a really good, competent engineer that's enjoying their work and adding value for the business.
Brilliant. So what advice would you offer to leaders and managers to really invest in people to thrive?
I've always believed that people need to be given the opportunity of success, and the best way of doing that is to ensure that, you know, they're equipped and they're educated and they've got the knowledge that they need to do. So, you know, encourage people to self-develop, encourage people to continue to learn. You know, don't try not to put people in a situation and ask the impossible. If you know there's a new product coming out, if you know there's a new tool coming out, do they know how to use that? How are you going to train them on how to use that? How do you get the best out of that?
How important is it to feel confident to fail?
Very. If I think back, you know, one of the things that one of my managers sort of passed on to me was, I won't measure you on success or failure. Failures will inevitably happen. And if it does happen, I'll measure you on how you deal with it. So, you know, it's not that something's gone wrong, it's this has happened and this is what we're doing about it. And I can remember an instant where I'd had a problem on the job that I was working on. And rather than sort of call my boss and say, you know, this is a problem, I don't know what to do, I phoned him up and I said, this has happened, this is what I've done about it, and I just wanted you to know because at some point somebody's going to come and speak to you. You know, and he was fine, that's great, brilliant, well done for dealing with it, and off you go. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? If you're empowered to sort of deal with a mistake and you know, maybe come and offer 3 different solutions to a problem, then that's better than somebody scolding you because something's gone wrong.
When you're taking on an apprentice, do you sometimes feel that you need to rewire that? Because within education, there isn't really space to fail. You know, the system is about achievement.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because, like you say, obviously, as you come through school, it all hinges on an exam result at the end of the day. Whereas in the workplace, it's more about that constant evolution, that constant growing, that self-development, that learning new things. So I think it is a bit more forgiving for people making mistakes along the way. So there's a lot of work we do with apprentices when they come in, especially if they're school leavers, to get them sort of workplace ready. And I think that's a big miss with the schools, if I'm honest. I think they're too focused on attainment of the academic qualifications, and they forget that these youngsters are coming out into the workplace, you know, some of them at 16 into an apprenticeship, and they've got no idea how to conduct themselves or what to do. You know, even some of the basic fundamentals of, you know, 90% of people that come and work in an office will need to use Microsoft Office or Outlook or Teams. These kids have never even seen half of those things. They've got no idea how they work. So some real basics in school to help them with that transition would really, really help.
It's interesting, a lot of then the, you know, world-class corporations now encourage failure, and it's not failure, it's a learning.
Yeah.
What opportunities do you see can kind of come out of then having that mindset?
Ultimately, if you've got that safe and trusted environment, and you kind of, it's true what people say, you learn from your mistakes, you know, and it can be difficult as a manager to allow people to fail, you know, but sometimes you've got to let that happen, because, you know, ultimately, if you get something wrong, inevitably you'll learn from it and you won't do it again. You know, I can remember times throughout my career where something's not quite gone right, and when I reflect back on it, I realise that somebody's actually let that fail. They could have quite easily stepped in and stopped it, you know, and they may have even come and demonstrated to me after the event when I've been struggling, well, just do this. And actually it's quite simple. But I've been allowed the time to sort of learn and process, and off the back of it, I think you get more from it.
So true, and it's interesting that these businesses like Amazon feel that the innovations and their amazing accomplishments actually only come from giving them the position to create that culture. How do you create then your kind of sort of like culture and that kind of sort of learning development philosophy with people?
I think you know, for TGW, I think that the culture has been built on this belief of focusing on people learning and growing, and that's something that we try and live across the business, and ultimately give those people that chance. You know, put proper training in place for people, allow them to develop. You know, make sure they've got pathways, and we're quite active in that area for them.
So why does training and development matter so much for employees and employers?
I think for the individual, you know, well, certainly for me, you know, I've always wanted to learn new things and develop, and I won't say I get bored quickly, but I'm constantly looking for new things. I constantly want to learn new things, and when I think about that, how that's sort of been passed on to my teams, and seeing how they develop, you know, especially some of the younger employees coming in, the opportunities that they get from learning things, you know, and you know, maybe traveling or maybe going and doing a different job, you know, clearly that benefits them because they're interested, they're motivated to do things, and also for the business, you know, you to grow people and development from, you know, maybe an apprentice to a manager or beyond, you know, that's really important, and it helps the business to grow and be successful.
Brilliant. Learning development, why does it matter?
I think it's many reasons. You know, I think if you work in the industry like we do, you know, the tech sector is it's constantly growing, it's constantly evolving. If I think back to when I first started, you know, what things were like then compared to what they're like now and how much that changed. If you don't change with it and you don't continue to grow and develop, you're left behind, you're out of the game. So, you know, that's probably the main thing for me, is that constant evolution of where the industry's going is sort of then driving the need to develop and learn new skills for the individuals as well.
And that's so true, because businesses can become complacent and just stick with what they've always done, and that's an easy route. How have you enhanced your workplace by creating a learning and development culture?
So it's still evolving, and it's still growing. When I first joined, I had one guy doing a bit of controls training, and then over time that changed into a technical training team, and we added mechatronics trainers, and we started focusing on where the gaps were, what was missing. We bought certain things in-house rather than going external for that, and we've massively improved the facilities that we've got as well. More recently then, that's me now looking at L&D holistically across sort of the Northern Europe part of the business, and how we bring that together. So it's still early days. I've only been doing that a few months, but it continues to grow, and we look at where are the gaps and how do we meet the needs, you know, and a lot of that comes through what we're doing with these early careers and how that helps to sort of the springboard for people to develop.
What's Lean Six Sigma when it comes to continued improvement?
The Lean Six Sigma sort of concept is it's about taking a process, reviewing it, and evolving it and refining it over time. And that, when you think, that's kind of what we're trying to do with our learning as an individual. You know, you you're the process. You know, you're taking what you know and you're refining it and you're improving it over time to make you better at what you're doing, whether that's inside of work or outside.
So is that something that you see as kind of investing in people holistically helps them improve their productivity, their, you know, what they're giving to investing in the business?
Yeah, absolutely. If people are sort of well educated and well equipped, then clearly the business is going to see better results. And Lean Six Sigma is a good example of that, because if you promote that continuous improvement in your processes in what you're doing as a business, that kind of links straight back into the individuals then and what they're doing and their self-awareness and improvement.
Brilliant. How would you recommend to become a good technical leader?
Experience. You know, there's no shortcut for experience. For me, I think as I went through my career, that foundation knowledge, that becoming a competent engineer, becoming good at what I did as an engineer, undoubtedly that experience was so valuable to then make a step into a management or leadership role, because then you can pass that on, you can pass that knowledge on. You kind of know what good looks like, so you can set the standard. And I've always tried to push my teams to deliver quality, you know, make sure that what we're doing is the best we possibly can do with the hand that we're dealt to work with. So I think that's quite key, you know. But also you've got to create that safe environment. You've got to build the relationships. You've got to encourage the teamwork and communication. And you know, one of the things I've always promoted within my teams is knowledge sharing. And that's not specifically about learning and development, but that's about creating this go-to place for knowledge. You know, if somebody learns something themselves, why not share that with the team? Why not build that library of information? If you think about when you're at home, if you're looking at how to do something, 9 times out of 10 we go on YouTube and we watch a short video. You know, if you've got that similar knowledge that you can pull on within the business, whether that be a video or just, you know, a few notes, that's so powerful then for the team, because not everybody's having to go through that same learning experience.
How do you capture, store and disseminate that information?
It varies. Obviously it depends on, you know, sort of one team to another, but one of my sort of go-to tools was Microsoft OneNote. So we would build a library of information. Within that, you can have documents and videos and photographs, and just create simple how-to guides and things like that.
So what top tips would you offer to really build strong relationships within your team?
I think the first one's got to be communication. You know, it's all about good communication, whether that's within the team itself or outside of it. You know, have a good cadence, have regular one-to-one meetings, take the time within those one-to-ones to talk about things outside of the workplace. You know, don't just focus on the task in hand, get to know people, build that relationship, build that rapport with them. You know, and then outside of that, it's building trust, you know, and that's a foundation to creating that sort of trust within the team and that safe environment. You know, and then, as I said earlier, it's about, you know, encouraging knowledge sharing, getting that team to really work together as a team. You might have somebody that's really good at starting something but never ever finishes it, whereas you might have somebody else in the team that's very, very good at finishing things but they're not creative. So how do you pick up on that? How do you draw the best out of those individuals in the team?
How do you adapt to different learning behaviours, personalities?
I think it's something that you have to sort of gain the experience over time to know how to deal with those different personalities. I can remember very early on in my sort of management career trying to take a similar management style with the team holistically, failed very, very quickly, because I didn't appreciate that, you know, what worked for one person didn't necessarily work for another. So you kind of have to get to know the individual and understand, you know, well, what motivates them, you know, and what's going to get the best out of them. And then you have to adapt your style, you know, of how you manage them, or even how you're trying to sort of educate them or empower them to learn something. You know, we're all different in how we approach things.
We're both here because we want to make a difference to the education system and just education as a whole. What learnings can the education sector take from that experience that you just shared?
The whole way that we educate people is very one-dimensional. It doesn't suit different learner styles. It doesn't suit, especially anybody that's got any form of SEN need. You know, what are we doing? What are we putting some of these people in these situations for? Why don't we understand them more? Why don't we adapt our style to help them? If you don't create the right environment for somebody to learn, how can they possibly learn? And that's the bit that I find frustrating. Schools haven't changed certainly from when I was there to what they're doing today. It's exactly the same. Nothing's changed, nothing's evolved. We still measure people on the success of an exam. You know, that's not the real world. That's not how we do things in the workplace. You know, you measure the output of somebody over a period of time. You look at how they're evolving and what they're doing. So I think the education, sort of sector really needs to start to talk to businesses and understand more about how they operate and how they work, and start to reflect on what that can bring to them and how they try and educate people.
If I had Aladdin's lamp and gave you 3 wishes to make that change, and forget money, forget anything to do culturally, politically, all those different bits, what would be the 3 things that you'd like to see change, or what would be your wishes?
Good question. I think giving people a voice, first of all, give the people that are learning a voice to understand what they need, and then let's, off the back of that, then create something that works for them. Something, and I know you can't be so broad that you can change it for everybody, but if there's a specific need for a group of people, how do we meet that? How do we change that? I don't think you can just rub a lamp and put 3 wishes in there. I think there's more to it. It's deeper than that, and it's. I guess the main thing is for the people at the top looking at how we're educating, to open their eyes a little bit. Open your eyes and see what's going on, and understand that one person's need is very different to another, and start to adapt that style. And the big thing I would change is the exam system and the way that works, because for me, it's just not fit for purpose.
That's a great answer, and that's so true, because there isn't a magic wand, and we've got to shift over time. And all these things, as you just said, it's the same. School still feels the same as when we were younger.
Yeah.
And why have we not evolved? But evolution can only happen over time by listening to people and learning. I suppose this learning development culture within then schools, and how we can kind of influence and support schools in order to do that. And as fellow, enterprise advisors, that's one of the things that drives me. On that note, what drives you to want to make a difference in education?
I think it's seeing how it's failing people. I think, that going back to the school system, why does a teacher need a degree? A lot of teachers go through their own education, get a degree, and then become a teacher. Well, if we think about some of the things we've spoken about today, a lot of it comes down to experience. Where's their experience to draw on? If they've just gone through an education system, and then at the back of it, they're putting people through an education system. This is one of the reasons why it's not evolving. If you look at further education and colleges and universities, they don't all have degrees that are teaching, but they have life experience. And as it becomes more specialist, those experiences that people have learned throughout their career or whatever they've done in their life are more powerful than just taking somebody through the academia. So at what point then do schools start to realise that? And does it need to be a teacher with a degree that's followed a certain path that does everything in a school? Or could it be somebody like you or me that came in to help with the specific, to provide that enrichment and that experience to the students?
So interesting, and I'm completely with you. And it's this kind of, we could be here for hours talking over this, because it is that piece and that bridge between industry and academia, and thinking about the learner as the kind of core focus rather than just the result and just the statistic that kind of comes out of it. Kind of what you mentioned earlier, listening to the individual and finding out what their learning needs are, is so important. And it's how we make that happen. And
Yeah.
I think we're going to need more than a magic lamp.
Yeah, more than me and you.
What is it that you love most about your career?
I think right now, the bit that I really sort of motivates me and where the passion is about helping people to develop, helping people to, be a better version of themselves, or the best version of themselves that they can be. Over time, that's obviously changed as I've done different roles, but yeah, right now it's about bringing people out of themselves and helping them to self-develop.
It's interesting because that relates, isn't it? It's more than just you and I, and how we can kind of create a bit of a movement. And you can see that you're on that quest, and kind of working with primary schools, the ripple of that across the communities is a powerful thing, and it's more than just your recruitment talent pool.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's really admirable. So what would you say is your superpower when it comes to helping people feel inspired to thrive?
I think there's a couple of bits. If I think about my sort of belief in self-learning and continuous learning, and how I've sort of put that across to people within my team, to help them to sort of do that as well. Be prepared for what they want to do, be well positioned and well educated, and learning's a journey, and that journey doesn't stop when you finish education. And some people, I don't think some people see that initially. You're still at the start of your journey almost. It's a bit like learning to drive, isn't it? You pass your test, you think that's it, I've learned to drive, but no. The real sort of quality of your driving improves over time as you get that experience, and that's what I try to pass on to people in the workplace with their learning and growing as well.
Brilliant. What inspires you to thrive?
That's an easy answer, people. Yeah, whether it be thinking back to when I was a kid, and looking at the work ethic of my dad, of my granddad, their ability to sort of turn their hand to this and that practically. That ultimately shaped me and led me into the career that I went into. Then as I started studying engineering, it was people like Brunel and looking at what he did and what he achieved, and a lot of that's still rooted in what we do today within engineering. And then more recently, it's seeing those people, working with those youngsters, bringing them in, seeing them from potentially a school leaver to an engineer at the end of it. That's really quite empowering.
Amazing. Well, thank you, because you've certainly inspired me, and actually your passion is really infectious, really. I'm on the journey with you, and I want to kind of sort of continue supporting, and hopefully then this content, will kind of connect you with other people, and it's all of that piece of us trying to create then this movement so everyone feels that sense of inclusion, which is beyond just feeling inspired to thrive, making that sense of community, which you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, good. It's been great to talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers.